making more progress now, yes. Here we're making more progress now, still have a long way to go. They promised to bring us more revenue and quality, promised to bring us more revenue and quality, promised to bring us more revenue and quality. Instead is now on its way. Yes, here we're making more progress now, yes, here we're making more progress now, yes, here we're making more progress now. Selectmen will help us all out. They promise to bring us more revenue and quality, promise to bring us more revenue and quality, promise to bring us more revenue and quality. Winchester's now on its way. That isn't very good, isn't it?
Hello everybody, this is Brian O'Haron. I'm back again. This is the Christmas vacation. The show is composed in two different houses, two libraries, and one hotel. So if it's got a little bit of misspellings in here, that's the beauty of computers. You can work from almost anywhere, knock out these slides and get on and get going. We're going to have an interesting show, a lot of meat packed in today. The first thing we have is the agenda. It's going to kind of a short agenda, only 5 items on it. One is comments, which I'll make, very short this week. Then I'm going to talk a lot about Mr. Route 8, one of my original mentors, Tony Mishakowski of Torrington, Connecticut, 22-year state representative and real results orientated. I worked for him when I was in high school in his Tony's restaurant up on high on Main Street and off of Midgeon Avenue, actually, in Torrington, Connecticut. I worked there night shifts when I was going through high school and slept during school and during the day. But I learned more from him, I think, than I ever could from school. So today I'm going to pay tribute to him. I have many mentors, as you're beginning to find out, since I was a kid, starting with my parents and grandfather and uncles and aunts and all, and moving up the scale through teachers, and then finally entrepreneurs. When I got to be 11, I started working for entrepreneurs, and some of them will be shown on here. Then I'm going to talk a bit today about the Enterprise Corridor and where we stand on that progress, because we need that for the quantum leap. We need those developments up there, practical plus all the other development we're going to do on the Enterprise Corridor as a result of running the sewer and water pipes down almost to the Torrington town line. And then we'll talk a bit about the financials of the development, where we stand now, because Winchester Estates has come back in for the process after being denied by planning and zoning some months ago with a new configuration. I'm going to compare those two configurations for you today to show you a bit about the economics of them at a very high, rough level, nowhere near official numbers, just a rough idea. And then I'm going to talk, I have some financial report if I can get that far. The first thing I'd like to say in the comments today is that I want to continue a bit with how businessmen think. I probably should have gone over this last week, but for one reason or another, I didn't put it in. But I think it's probably the most critical thing that businessmen have to learn to do, and these businessmen have learned to do over the years. That's why they're successful. Businessmen are used to trusting people. You have to trust people in business. Business is built on trust. You have to trust everybody. But not only do you have to trust, but you have to verify and learn who to trust and who you can trust and who you can't trust over the long term. So you start out by trusting, and then you verify everything for a while, and then when you get to the point where you don't think you have to verify anymore, then you have a real bond between two people that probably last a lifetime. If not, if you can't trust somebody and they prove that they cannot be trusted, it's proven that they cannot be trusted, they are cautious about trusting them again. Very difficult to trust people when they continually show they can't be trusted, especially with important confidences. So when a confidence is given between any of these political parties or any selectmen to the other selectmen that's supposed to be held in confidence information that might come out of some kind of a meeting or something, or a plan, when a confidence is given, the recipient betrays that confidence to the press, especially the press, or anyone else, it is considered a major offense. Now, I particularly still have this problem with people, selectmen, talking to the press and using the press as a battering ram against other political parties or other select people. And I think that more and more we have to say, no comment to the press, let them get their information from the public meetings. And if there are any comments, they should all be positive, and that we're all working together as a team. They shouldn't be pitting one person against the other. A major offense is difficult to overcome. Once there's a major offense, distrust, then it's difficult to overcome, and especially if this betrayal leads to embarrassment for someone and or their family. It's not good, and we try to keep people's families and things like that out of the press as much as we can. It always hurts me to see some state senator or some U.S. senator standing up with his innocent family trying to explain away some of his transgressions. And we shouldn't be doing that in our town either. So having said that, I'm just going to talk a little bit now about a mouse pad I had up at the hotel in Maine. I went to see my daughter and my grandchildren for a few days this Christmas. And it was called IOU, and it was about leadership, ownership, and urgency. And it all falls into what I call the hospitality part of what we're trying to do in this town. So the leadership part is lead by example, lead by commitment, walk the walk. When I talk about it, we usually say walk the talk. If you say something, try to do it yourself. I have seen examples on TV where selectmen say things, but yet in their private life they do just the opposite. So you got to walk the talk, and people will notice if you don't. Listen actively and hear. That's a big thing. Most people listen. If you want to be successful, you have to listen to expertise that others have that perhaps you don't. Down here, I have to listen to the people that are running this program and doing all the technical work, and they do an excellent job, but I would be foolish to think I knew more than they do about doing their job. They probably know more than I do about sitting in this chair, but that's a different story. The next is ownership. You got to say, hey, it's up to me. We can't be blaming other people. We can't be blaming the past. These are my guests. These people are my guests. Remember, this comes from a hotel, and they're trying to teach people how to deal with their guests. I'm responsible no matter what the issue. Don't blame it on the guest. I choose my attitude. Have a good attitude with the guests. I care for it like it was my own. And think out of the box. I usually say lateral thinking because I'm very good friends with Edward de Bono, the world's leading author in the area of lateral thinking. We'll talk about that if we ever get time. But thinking out of the box is kind of what they say in America, probably because Edward's got the copyright on the use of lateral thinking. Anyway, urgency, do it now. Take immediate initiative. Be proactive. Seek creativity. Seek creative solutions. Seek answers, not questions and not challenges. One of these days I'm going to talk to you about peeling the layers of the onion. I keep forgetting to bring the onion in, but when we talk to people, we usually have to peel the layers of an onion to get at the truth. Sometimes there's many layers before you can finally get down to the facts because many excuses are given along the way. So that's what I wanted to put here. I didn't put it up as a slide because it's kind of small written. Now I want to get to my guest for today. That's Mr. Tony Michikowski. You should see his picture here on the screen, and I would like to leave it up there because Tony Michikowski was one of my first mentors when I was a kid, when I worked in his restaurant. Now, he was also at the same time a state senator, and state representative. And I think he served at the same time as John Grapple from our area up here. Tony started his business in a chicken coop when he got back from the war. And also, when he got back from the war, he won a car in a lottery down in Torrington when cars were very scarce after the war, and they hadn't been making them for quite a while for the war effort. So he started this business in a chicken coop. I can remember as a young child buying a hot dog from him on Butler Street up near the Polish Church in Torrington, Connecticut. Then he moved up farther up the street, and that's where I worked in his small place, which grew over the years after I left. And wherever I went in the world, if I went to Frankfurt or I went to Hamburg or I went to Poland, I would send him a postcard from Frankfurt, Hamburg, and for Poland, of course, it's kielbasa. But and he had a secret sauce there, and he's now today 86 years old, lives in Torrington, Connecticut on Michigan Avenue, and he has the recipe for the secret sauce still in his safe. Now, I'd like to say that Tony was a taxpayer's candidate. He was very results-orientated. He was a Democrat, still is, who voted Republican. I don't think he's very popular in the Democratic Party for that. But he was an advocate in the Democratic Party for changing things and getting the rest of the Democrats to go along with his ideas. One of which was, and best idea was, he is called Mr. Route 8 around Connecticut, especially down in Hartford, because he was the guy who was most responsible for getting Route 8 run from Bridgeport up to Torrington. And he told me when I went to see him the other day that and I'm not sure about this, I'm going to call Mr. Grappo, I don't know him personally, but he says John Grappo was also instrumental in getting it run from Torrington to Winston. Now, without Route 8, guess what? We wouldn't have any development coming up here of the size and size and quality that it's going to be. Will be very difficult. We wouldn't even have probably what we have here now without Route 8. Some people might think that's good. Most people probably like the benefits of Route 8. So today I decided, because I'm going to be talking a lot about the development today, to put up Tony. He's responsible for a lot of things, for getting Route 8 run in. By the way, he was also father of the Connecticut Lottery. And it was House Bill 7238 and Public Act 71-865, he reminds me. He was a Polish-American who stayed back twice in the first grade because he couldn't speak English. I do have other friends who stood back in the first grade in those days, too, because they spoke French or some other language around the house before they went to school and couldn't master the language in time. So they had to take a couple years in the first grade. Anyway, he worked his way all the way up. He was 22 years as a state legislator and very, very well known. He's also a World War II combat veteran, 3rd Division, Company F, 7th Infantry, Southern France invasion, Rhineland, Africa, and Anzio. So he was a combat veteran, not serious stuff, and I thank him for that, World War II. He's a very successful entrepreneur. Besides his restaurant, he also owned quite a bit of real estate around Torrington. A successful businessman, results-oriented, and a good mentor for me. A very successful 65th Assembly District man for 22 years from the city of Torrington, Connecticut. Just a portion of his accomplishments. Did a lot to get the Yukon branch into Torrington, various health districts around the area, Willow Gardens, the first housing for elderly citizens in the state for Connecticut, elderly people. He voted against a state income tax always for 22 years. I think that finally did him in the end after 22 years. He saved the Torrington taxpayers millions of dollars by having the state take over all major highways going through Torrington, including snow removal and traffic lights and maintenance of those. He garnered money, $150,000, which in those days was a lot of money, from the state of Connecticut for the Sullivan Senior Center in Torrington. His lottery has created over 15,000 new jobs made over 1,000 new millionaires to date, and earned a state profit of $6 billion and built Route 8. He also appropriated money to build new bridges and the widening of the Route 202 to Hartford. Many, many other things. Now, Tony also has a brother named Al Michikowski, who also was one of my mentors in a different way. Al worked at the restaurant as well and was in the Navy during the war. Al was also called Al Maskey. Tony, by the way, is 86, and Al is 82. And Al ran in Polish a program in Torrington that my mother always listened to called Pololian Melodies. And he knew all the famous Polish musicians. They came through the restaurant to give him records to put on the jukebox, so hoping he would play them on his show, the Connecticut Twins and all those kind of people. So I met all those, and I got to spend a lot of time with them, and I got to love Polish music. And that's one of the reasons why I play the accordion. Actually, it's a squeeze box. Al played everything. He had a band, and he played in almost every Polish wedding there was in town. When I went to Poland, I was surprised because it was during the time of the Iron Curtain before Glasnost, and it was nowhere near as happy over there as it was in my hometown of Torrington in the Polish section up near Michigan Avenue and Pulaski Street. And, I couldn't get over that. They tell me now, though, that it's just as, everything's come out from underground, and it's just as happy as it always was, and I've always had a good time. So I'd like to thank Al also for helping me along the way. And after Al on the Pololian Melodies every Sunday morning was another hour of Otta Randazzo. She played all the Italian music, and since I had a Sicilian Maltese background, we listened to that every Sunday as well. Okay, now I'm going to change, and we're going to change backgrounds here. And I want to talk a bit about the Enterprise Corridor, sewer and water. First, I guess I should say dziękuję to Tony and East Domu Spach, and I'll see you again. It was a very enlightening meeting I had with him a few days ago to garner all these facts. Very, very successful and encouraging entrepreneur and mentor. The Enterprise Corridor is the corridor down the old Route 8 between Winsted and Torrington. We've talked about it on a few of the last shows. Planning is very instrumental for getting water and sewer down there for this new development and all the development we want to do in the Enterprise Corridor, which we already have permission for, and where people can get tax breaks to set up businesses, etc. But Planning and Zoning has discussed the recommendation by the selectmen at their last meeting, and a letter was submitted by the developer to Planning and Zoning. They didn't get a chance to look at it last time because it came in kind of late, but I see he's got the camera pointed here. I better put up one of the slides for you. I lose a little track here when I get moving. Okay, I'll put this up. This might help you a little. All right. So the letter was submitted a little too late for them to look at the last meeting, so it will be looked at in a future meeting. Both these things will be considered at the P&Z meeting on Monday, January 28, 2008, in the Hicks Room of the Town Hall. That'll be a public hearing. So anybody who's interested in this development and wants to hear the facts from the real experts and not from the armchair experts or armchair quarterbacks, get down to the meeting and hear it for yourself. Listen for yourself, especially to the public hearing, because that's when the experts come in and they present this stuff, and then they ask a lot of questions. So it's good to be there. And let me tell you, few people go that are in favor of things. A lot of people go who aren't in favor of things. So it'd be nice to see some balance there and get people out that are also in favor of these developments and the benefits of the developments, which we'll talk a bit about tonight. A meeting was held with a representative of the Litchfield Hills Council of elected officials and a representative of the State Office of Policy Management, and the P&Z chairman and P&Z director and the mayor and a selectman were present at that meeting. Evidently, the criticality of the situation seems to be more or less agreed, and matters will continue to progress towards the in-the-ground date objective of somewhere around midsummer. Doesn't mean it'll be achieved, but that's what we were talking about on previous shows, and hopefully before next winter we can get these people digging into the ground and getting on with these, get our permits and get them going. So the most important issue for Highland Ridge Estates and Country Club, which they've already received the Inland Wetland and Planning and Zoning approval for, is still the obtaining of the Army Corps of Engineers and Department of the Environment, DOE permits. Planometrics, which is a company somewhere around here in Connecticut that helps people plan their long-term plans for conservation and development. They're like consultants. They will attend an informal meeting with the P&Z on January 14th, 2007 to discuss their possible participation in the future planning of updates to the POCD. I think it's kind of agreed now that in one form or another it will be evolved and there won't be a revolution there, but I'm not positive, so don't hang me if they end up with a revolution. The latest Winchester Estates application, which is the second development we keep talking about, the one that was denied in planning and zoning but approved in inland wetlands in the past, it was denied for reasons of density in the past, and we'll talk a bit about that later. The latest Winchester Estates application, which will most likely not need approval from the Army Corps of Engineers and DP, are being processed now. The P&Z public hearing is scheduled the P&Z public hearing is scheduled for January 28th, 2008 at 7 p.m. in the Hicks Room, weather permitting. You know how the weather is around here. They may not have it, but they'll postpone it if there's bad weather. Inland Wetlands will continue processing the application during their regular scheduled meetings on third Wednesday of each month, the weather permitting again. The next meeting is on January 16th, 2008 in the Hicks Room of the Town Hall, weather permitting. Now, as far as the new Winchester Estates, I did a little comparison here because I like to work with numbers. Remember, my Indian name is He Who Flies by Instruments, so I like to fly by instruments and their numbers usually. If that's all right, I just hit the stand. You might want to check it and see if it's still okay. Anyway, the old one that was denied was 122 acres and 387 multi-unit family residences, broken down in a certain way that I'll explain in a minute. The current one is still 122 acres, but it's 302 condos instead of, and they're also different configurations, but that's a smaller number, and that's mainly because of the density issues. And besides, although they reduced that number, they have included things like soccer fields and a swimming pool and a clubhouse and things like that. I'm not exactly sure on the details. I'll know more after I attend their meeting at the end of January. But basically, they got a pile of stuff there at the town hall that would take you a month or two to read, and I just didn't have the time to go through all that. But I will hear it when I go, condensed version, when I go to the public hearing, and you can do the same if you want to. So that's it. We went from 387 to 302. Now, the application that was denied had 120 age-restricted apartment-style condos. Age restriction is 55 and older. That basically means there probably won't be many children in that part of the development. So the first one had 120 age-restricted apartment-style condos. This was requested by the town of Winchester from the developer way back years ago. And then it had 123 age-restricted multi-family condos, 123. So altogether, that's 243 age-restricted buildings of one sort or another. And then they also had in their configuration 144 unrestricted condos. That means that they could have children in those condos. So the balance was heavy on, let's say, you know, 2/3 of it was age-restricted with no children. 1/3 had children allowed. And that is important when you start looking at the profit and loss of these developments to see how they balance in the town. Again, I think I mentioned it once before, we're not against children, we love children, but we must watch the balance to make sure that we don't flood the schools, and I don't think this will flood the schools, and that's what I want to go through today so that you get some idea, because there are a lot of rumors, a lot of people spread rumors about these things that perhaps aren't facts. Not saying all mine are the facts, but we will upgrade anything. This all comes from public information for the town, so it's as accurate as I can get it at this particular time. Some of the numbers I'm going to talk about later come from the developer, alone, and they're just estimates, pure estimates, and some of the school stuff is pure estimates as well. But now, what is the new one? The current one is 125 age-restricted, 55 and older. So that's dropped from 243 down to 125. And the number of unrestricted with 2 to 3 bedrooms and children okay, that's raised up a little bit, and I'll show you that on the next slide. So here's basically what's happened here is we've gone from restricted from 243 down to 125 for the age restricted, and we've gone up by 33 in the unrestricted, which means children allowed, from 144 to 177. Now the difference here is we've subtracted 120 age-restricted apartment-style condos that we had in the original configuration that was too dense for to be accepted, and we've added 3 age-restricted condos and 3 unrestricted multi-family condos. So we've actually added more unrestricted and taken away a lot of age-restricted. And then we've included perhaps more open space. I'm not quite sure on the details on this, but I will find out at the meeting when I go. And in the open space will be, first of all, there'll be open space. And I was just my daughter's renting in one of these developments up in Maine, and boy, they have a lot of open space, So in this open space area, that's called passive open space area, there's a clubhouse, swimming pool, athletic fields, natural trails. I'm not so sure how much of that is shared with the other development, Highland Ridge and Country Club, and I did send an email off to the developer to try to clarify that. Again, I'll know that on future programs, and we'll pin that down. But so we made a trade-off there of age-restricted apartments, a number of them, for the more open space than was in the first one, and these extra amenities here that the town kind of wanted to see in maybe not exactly the form submitted, but in one form or another for the children and the taxpayers in the town to enjoy. Then the next planning and zoning meeting, public hearing, which I urge you all to go to. It's in a small room, the Hicks room in Town Hall, probably holds 30, 40 people, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Very uncomfortable chairs. But planning and zoning runs a pretty efficient meeting, and I've always been impressed by the way they run their meetings, and very well chaired, and I think you'll find it'll be very interesting for you to listen to this. And there'll be public there making comments, and you're welcome to make any comments yourself too and seek any answers. It all goes into the public record. It's all done on tape. So if you can't make the meeting, you can get a copy of the tapes. Cost $10 a tape. They're audio tapes, and you can listen to what happened there. There'll be a few hours of that, and there may be another meeting in the future months with another couple hours. But it'll go until everybody's happy that the chairman and the planning and zoning people have heard all the evidence. And then in the wetlands, their next meeting is January 16th, and a public hearing probably won't be required for that, but you're welcome to go and listen. You can't say anything at a non-public meeting, but you can listen. So now I want to show you the assumptions that I made. The assumptions are, for the future things I'm going to talk about here, the number of condos planned, all that information comes right from the information on the application submitted to the town. I just went down and got a copy of each application, about 4 or 5 pages, and I got that data from there for the last one and for this one. And so the numbers should be pretty accurate, give or take a little, 1 or 2 if they decide to change during the public hearings or during all this process of approval. When they put conditions on all these, they could put it, all kinds of conditions can go on there. Less this, more that, more open space, less open space, more age restricted, less, age restricted, more unrestricted, less unrestricted, there's all kinds of conditions that will be put on these things, agreed to by the town and the developer, hopefully. The per capita expense comes from a report that was submitted with the Highland Ridge stuff into the public hearing. You can get a copy of it from the town hall or from me if you want one. It's called the Harold Michalowski Report, submitted for the record during the Highland Ridge Estates and Country Club public hearing in 2006, and it's on page 6. Most of the information I used, the numbers. The expense per pupil may not be quite up to date. It's also from the same Harold Michalowski report, which did a very interesting report, by the way. If you can get a copy of it, it's in my green papers down at the City Hall. You can also get it from Planning and Zoning or Inland Wetlands, probably. But it tells a lot about the town, how many children per house, how many cars per house, all that kind of stuff. So that's where I got this information from. I did send an email to both. I sent it to the superintendent of schools, and I sent it to an individual to pass on to Dr. Cressy, because I didn't have his email address up there in Maine. But I'm just trying to verify this 6720 is still fairly accurate. That's how much it costs us to send a child to school after the state grants. So before the state grants, it's much more than that. But after the state grants, it's somewhere in that area. And if I get better information than is in this report, I will change these numbers and go over them with you. But I wanted something so you could get a rough idea before the end of January, when the public hearing is, what we're looking at here. So now, those are all, there will be recurring. Most of the things I'm looking at are recurring tax income that are coming into the town. Recurring revenue for the town of Winchester for our company. Now, there's also one-time revenues coming in that are quite substantial. For each home connection fee, there's a sewer connection fee of about $1,000 per unit, and there's a water connection fee of $1,000 per unit. So if there's roughly 850 units, that's $850,000 times 2. You're up to 1.6 million, something like that. That goes into the water and sewer budget and is used for the benefit of the town one way or another. That information comes from the town of Winchester documentation at Public Works. If you go down there and ask the director of Public Works, he can tell you and verify those numbers. So, but they're once off. Those are like permit fees. And then there's other permit fees that I don't have on here, but that's like for building the houses. There's a fee, permit fee for each house, and that's all one-time revenue as well. The permit fees for the houses and apartments and condos, they go into in the regular town budget. So that helps us to get our $16 million average growth every year, and this will really help in that area. Okay, now, having given you those, I will now talk a bit about each of these developments. And the first thing I want to say is Highland Ridge. That's the one that's already approved, waiting for the Army Corps of Engineers and the DOE approval. The first thing I want to say there is that the recurring revenue, there'll be 456 age-restricted residences there. That means no children. I think they put in their plan about 20 children, so I use that number here in these figures. And their sales price, according to the developer now, was originally about $350,000, but over the years here that they've been applying, it's gone up to $400,000 they're expecting to sell each of these units for. And the revenue to the town will be about $182,400,000. And the assessed value, you take the revenue and you multiply by 0.70, 70%. The assessed value is $127,680,000, and the taxes of the town will be about $4,374,317, and these are estimates. This is just a ballpark number, the best we can do at this particular time. All kinds of things will change between now and then, and this is over about a 10-year, 8-year period. The developer might say a little less than that, but I'm trying to be kind of conservative here. Next is, I used 8 in my spreadsheets that I did for the future objectives of the town. 8 years, 3% a year for 8 years. Once started, won't get started for 3 or 4 years. Okay, and then the recurring cost of the town be about 662. That comes from the Michalowski report, times 456, and that's 301. Actually, I used. I think I made a mistake there. The recurring cost of the town will be probably double that, because you'll have 2 people in every place, so it should be 2 times 456. So I got a mistake there, which I'll correct. So that'll be about 600,000, and then it'll be 20 children, roughly. Theoretically, there'll be none, but they figure one way or another, if somebody has to take care of a grandchild or something for some period of time, that could be there. So they put in 20, and that'd be 6,720. That comes from the Michalowski report as well, and that would be about $134,400 for educating those children. So the total recurring cost of the town will be $436,272 plus the 300 I didn't do right, so it'd be about 700,000 in that area of cost. Winchester Estates is the second one that's going through the process now. By the way, the one, as you can see, the first one's very profitable to the town. Hardly any children, a lot of money coming in, and it's really going to help us. And that's already, almost there, almost approved. So once it does get approved by, say, the middle of next summer, then we'll be off and running on the actual development part. A lot of people have all kinds of reasons, peel and layer the onion, why it won't be ever get done, because they won't sell the homes, there aren't enough people, there's not enough demand, on and on and on. But we're going to be positive here. We're going to try to work with this developer and get it done. And my view is, it can't hurt. All we can do is try to win. And if it never gets done, then, we've done the best we can, and we'll have to try to do better with what's left. But I think it will get done over time. Now, Winchester Estates is recurring revenue of 302 condos, revenue to the town of 125 times 248,000. That's for the ones that are age restricted. That's 31 million, and then 177 that are not age restricted. They're 42,303,000. So the total sales price is about 73,303,000. Again, these are just rough estimates to give you an idea of what area we're dealing with, what we're dealing with here. It's like my mother-in-law always told my wife she would marry a very handsome, good-looking, intelligent person, but she never could say that it would be Brian O'Haron. That came later in life. So we're going to have to just take a rough estimate here, and then later in life, we will find out the exact numbers as we move down over the next few years. But we're talking here about total sales price of $73,303,000, $73,303,000, assessed value of $51,312,100, and taxes to the town about $1,757,953. Now this is a smaller development, as you know, and it's based on average housing prices that are a little less than the first one. So I'll give you an example. The 125, they're going to range from 225,000 to 270,000. I used an average of 248 for these numbers. And then the 177 unrestricted, they're going to range from 219 to 259,000. And they're going to be 2 to 3 bedrooms. That's why they'll probably have, I've upped the number of children here, and you'll see in a few minutes on that. And there's an average there of 239,000 I use for these numbers. Now, the recurring cost of the town for Winchester Estates is a little different than the first one. You got, here I did the math right, so good thing I got the degree, I guess. But recurring cost of the town, 662 from the Harold Michalowski report, times 958. And remember, some of these numbers still got to be verified by the town eventually, but in times gone by, since this Harold report was done a year and a half ago, plus the best information I have available right now at my fingertips, times 958 residents, because there will be no children in those buildings, so I just multiplied the number units by the 2, and then so that's 600. There'll be 2 people in each unit, and I might even have a mistake there when I look at it now. But anyway, it's about 634,196, and it might be even less than that. I use 177 times 4. And no, I did it right. 177 times 4 and 125 times 2 plus 125 times 2. That should be a plus sign there. Equals 958. That's how many residents will be in this total complex, age restricted and I used two kids for each unrestricted one, 4 kids for each unrestricted one, and two people for 125. That's husband and wife, or husband and significant other, or whatever. There. So that comes up to $2,788,880, and that's how much the cost of the town will be. And then we have to take into consideration pupils, and they call them pupils now. When I was a kid, couldn't call them pupil. You had to call them a student. Pupil was a bad word. It meant person who couldn't learn. Nowadays, the state uses pupil, so everybody uses it. But that's $6,720 cost per pupil times 177 times 2. Now, I used a very conservative number here, too. The developer might say it's not going to be anywhere near 2 kids for each of these 177 units, but I did it that way, and I come up with these numbers. That's to be conservative, like an accountant would be, or somebody looking over your shoulder at your numbers. So if we have 2 people per condo, the recurring cost will be $3,423,076. If we have 1.5 people, the recurring cost will be $2,418,356. If it's only 1 pupil per condo, the recurring cost will be $1,823,636. And if we have 0.9 pupils per condo, which some educators say is probably more likely in the future than the 2 per average. I think the Miskolowski report last time used the average in Winston is about 2.2 or 2.1 pupils per household, on average. So some might have 8, some might have none, but on average it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2. I can't remember the exact number from there now, but it's in that neighborhood. And so if it's 0.9 pupils per condo, it'd be $1,070,496, a heck of a lot less than $3,423,076 with 2. That means they would have to bear that cost. Now, I do have people getting back to me, I hope, with more correct information on the exact cost of a student in this day and age. And we know the number of students is dropping in Winston. So now I want to show you the Highland Ridge and the estates and Winchester Estates, and I just moved the thing again. Tell me if it's, is anybody watching this? I guess not, but if you switch over to this slide, make sure it's centered right, because I just moved the stand. Is it okay? All right, thank you. Okay, now what I did is I put the 2 together so you could see the big picture. I call it the big picture always. $6,134,060 in revenue, minus $1,237,940 for per capita cost. That's the $662 I told you about from the report. That gives you, before any schools, $4,896,120. And then if schools, 2 per family, 2 pupils per family, the profit to the town for both will be $2,517,240,000. And if you divide that by the 600, that equals a mill now. It's about 3%. 612, 1824. That's 4 times 3. That's about 12% that you would have to pay in taxes extra in the future if this development weren't here. And if the profit, if it's less children, goes up. So I'm just going to not read each one this time, but it goes up if there's only 0.9 students in each family, or pupils in each family for the 177 condos, it'll be a profit to the town of $3,827,640,000. So that's the good news. Either way, this is good. If Winchester Estates gets approved, we can still probably do okay. Now, I want to say that, what about the children? We hear that a lot about in this town. What about the children? Well, then the children, and this is a bit of a crooked slide here, but let me try to straighten it out a little. Sometimes they get curled up, especially on rainy days. We have many schools for them to choose from. Let's assume there are 300, 350, worst case, 2 per 177 condos. We have many schools to choose from here, and some of the people who've been around town a long time said, well, Brian, they won't all go to the same schools. Some will go to trade school in Torrington, some will go to the Regional 7, some will go to St. Anthony, some will go off to other schools elsewhere, especially if we can ever get a voucher system put in town, which I think it would be a good idea. Other people don't, but So we have many schools to choose from. So they won't all go to the same schools. So, and they won't all go to the same grade. So they'll be spread out over the grades in these various school systems. The average number of pupils per family, I'm told by the educators, is going down. And instead of being 2.1 or 2 per family average, it'll be more like 0.9 or somewhere in that area. I'm not sure about that, and I'm still trying to seek information on that. Information comes slowly from bureaucracies, so, and we have to move fast. So I have to go with these estimates in the meantime so you can have an idea of where we're headed. And then there is talk that we can already absorb some number of students into the existing school system for a minimal cost because we have a lot of the structures there and the overhead there anyway. We might have to add a few teachers, or we might have to do this or that. But so, and there might be more examples. If anybody has any examples of why we will be able to absorb these students, let me know and I'll include them here on this list. Now, just for the fun of it and for a business thing, I'm going to now talk about the benefit of changing from 125 age-restricted in this Winchester Estates proposal application to the town. I just want to say, hey, what happens if we go, during the process, we say, gee, we the town would rather have less unrestricted condos, and we'd rather have more age-restricted condos, because that would help us in the town to balance the needs of the schools and the needs of the taxpayers. And I'm not saying we absolutely have to have this. I think we just made a case that we still make quite a bit of money, especially if we don't have an average of 2 children in each of the 177 condos. But let's just say we go ahead and we make a change here, and we try to balance this a little better, and it can be done. I'm just trying to find my own. Okay, here it is. You get $6,134,060 in revenue, $1,116,132 in the cost per capita. You get, this is after you make a change from 125 age restricted to 217 age restricted, leaving 85 unrestricted, as I say on the chart. Then you have a benefit before the school children of $5,017,928. Then you subtract, because let's assume there's still 2 in a home. When we get down to 85 unrestricted, that would be 1,142,400 to educate them, if there are 2. If there's only 0.9, it'd be a lot less. And then you got profit of town of 3,875,524, and then the difference is 1,358,284. So we've gained 1,358,284 by moving those from unrestricted to age-restricted. And if there are less pupils, then you can see these numbers get even more attractive. Then we have a profit to the town of up to $4,503,848,000. So you see, we could have a lot of benefit there. So I think the town should take that into consideration. The developer may not want to do it, or it may not be practical for the development, it may not happen. But it is another alternative to the already existing good alternative that we have. Now, I want to switch now for the last few minutes I have from that to talk a bit again about the upwards pressure on the budget, because we're getting into budget season now for the next year's budget. It's already starting. And turn of the year, by March 15th, we'll have to have a budget for 208, 209. And the fund balance is there. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But the upwards pressure on the budget hasn't changed since the last time I talked to you. It's about $1,074,245, 5.33%. These are just rough estimates that I picked out of various meetings that I watch on TV, or 5.33%. And don't forget the reevaluation effect. Remember, we talked about that in the earlier meetings. We already know that up on the lake, and it's still very unofficial, some people have gone up between 200 and 800, 900% for various reasons up there. So we've got a lot of concern about taxes in the more affluent areas, and I think even around town we got a lot of appreciation in our land in the last 5 years. So that's that. Now, the other thing I'd like to talk about now is the fund balance. There's a lot of talk about the fund balance because the fund balance is where is our saving account. You can read in the charter, and the fund balance is presently, and this is rough, I got these numbers a couple weeks ago from the finance director. It might even change a bit since then, but it's presently about $1,342,709, of which $1,047,055 is available for use if we should have a major disaster or a major catastrophe or a major need for this. In the charter it says this money is to be used for major, safe or major reasons, not be used flippantly. So only $1,047,000 of that 055 is available. So the rest is reserved for expenses we made towards the end of last year that still haven't materialized, and it's called a reserve in business. They call it something a little different here, but so that money, $1,047,555, is available for use if necessary. The remainder is reserved for encumbrances and the purchase orders that were issued before June 3rd and the related goods or service that have not yet been received. And that's something that has to happen. Now, the fund balance is about 3.63% of our operating revenue. I checked this with the finance director, so these are pretty accurate numbers, although not perfect, as they change from day to day and from this to that, and interest rates and all that kind of thing. But the fund balance is about 3.63% of operating revenue now, and our auditor recommends a range of about 5 to 15% of operating revenue. So we're at the stage we're at now. Now, I did hear unofficially on one of the TV programs that we just got a check from the land, I don't know what to call it nowadays, but where we go to throw our refuse, rubbish, RRC something, has given us a check for $250,000 plus or minus for a lawsuit that went on with one of the Enron or one of those major companies. So that'll go into the fund balance most likely, and that'll help us a little bit. But our auditor recommends the 5 to 15%. Moody's, that's the credit rating for businesses, depends upon a reasonable amount in the fund balance of, say, 8 to 10% of operating revenue. And a couple of years ago, we did get our interest rate raised because Moody's didn't think we had enough money in the fund balance. It was a lot less than it is now. When they did that, I think it was like 400,000. Now we're in much better shape, although not in perfect shape. So what I want to say is that you just can't go into the fund balance and take money willy-nilly. So that's a bit of an upward pressure on the selectmen as well, that the fund balance, there's a balancing point in the fund balance that we all have to be careful of. So I really want you to understand the fund balance, and I'll probably talk a lot about it over this whole budget season over the next X months, because you'll hear a lot about it in the selectmen meetings, and you should understand what it is. And if you want to, you can read it about the fund balance. There are rules for it in the charter, and you can read the charter, get a copy at the town hall, and from the town clerk, and that should help you. Now, I just want to say I have a whole bunch of information to provide on this next subject, which is the appropriation of funds. I just want to try to give you an idea of, of how the town works financially over the next few months. Perfect it won't be, because it's very complex, and I'm trying to boil it all down and make it simple to understand for myself, never mind you, but it's very complex. And I personally am not a finance director. I'm a CEO that always has at my right hand a good finance director. And I can tell you that, matter of fact, excellent finance directors, and I can tell you Henry Centrella, our finance director, is excellent, and he's a pleasure to work with, and he thinks the right way, and he'll give you the right information, and he won't let you push him for inaccurate information. He wants to make sure that it's conservative and it's accurate, and I appreciate that from him, because that's what I expect from a finance director. So whenever we go to borrow to do anything, and we want to borrow money for one reason or another, or set up some project, we have to do a thing which is called in the charter appropriate funds. So that's a term you should become familiar with, appropriating funds. And that means like reserving. You have to say, in order to borrow, we have to appropriate in our budget, or one way or another, enough funds to cover everything we want to do on that particular project. And there are many ways of doing it financially. But basically our funds come from four areas, some of which include taxes. The budget, most favored, that may include taxes and may not. Depends on how the budget comes out each year. Fund balance, if it's safe. If the fund balance were $3 million in the fund balance, then we'd have plenty of money there and we could borrow from there. And in my sheets that I put out for plans for the next 5 years, that's where we would put a lot of our savings, probably in there or in some special savings account, same sort of thing. Then we would have money to draw when we needed it for buildings and things. The next thing, another alternative is bank notes, short-term or long-term, preferably not more than 4 years, with short-term interest rate. We'd have to pay interest on that, of course. By the way, on the fund balance, we get interest. We get that from wherever we have the fund balance invested. That's where we get interest on that. Okay, and then the bond, and we don't, according to Henry, we don't like to do bonds unless they're $1 million or more or over, and that usually requires some short-term borrowing because of the way bonds work. So with that, I think I've pretty well exhausted my time for today. Next week will be another selectmen meeting on Monday, and what I do is, because it's past my bedtime, these selectmen meetings, as I said before, what I'll do is I'll tape it on my tape recorder, and I'll watch it that night, probably 1 or 2 in the morning, and I'll try to analyze it and try to give you some feedback. What I'm hoping they do this time is move the question more often, stick to more the real policy issues, get a budget projection from the town manager for this year's budget and some idea how we're proceeding on the approach to next year's budget. If that happens at the selectmen meeting and it runs in a short time, more like an hour and a half than 3 or 3.5, and we don't have any long presentations, I'll be a very happy person. So with that, I say thank you very much. Watch the selectmen meeting, and then watch my meeting, my program next Friday, where we'll talk about the selectmen meeting and try to give you some insight into how things are happening there. Thank you very much. Good night, and have a happy new year.
Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Still have a long way to go. They promised to bring us more revenue and quality. Promised to bring us more revenue and quality. Promised to bring us more revenue and quality. Instead is now on its way. Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Selectmen will help us all out. They promise to bring us more revenue and quality. Promise to bring us more revenue and quality. Promise to bring us more revenue and quality. Winchester's now on
Hi everybody, this is Brian O'Haron, just after New Year's. Happy New Year to all. I hope we have a good year. A lot is going to happen in this year, so let's try to do well. The agenda for this week is, again, kind of short, but full of meat. Not much fat in here this week. First, I'll start out with a few comments. Then I'll talk about the major development financials, part 2. Last week we talked about a lot about the revenue from the condos and all. This week we're going to talk about a little different revenue that's coming along with these developments should they get approved. And then I'll talk a little bit about the 08-09 budget because that's upon us, and by the middle of the first quarter next year, March 15th, we have to have the first draft of the budget presented by the town manager to the Board of Selectmen, which will also have the first shot at the new mill rate for everybody so they can get a rough idea. It won't be the final one, but it will be a good approximation. And then I hope to talk a bit about intermediate term revenue, but I'm not sure we'll get that far. We'll give it a chance. So the first thing I want to do is I want to point out to you that if we can switch to the slides now over here. Thank you. When I was about 18 or 19, when I got out of high school in Torrington, I went off to an art school for a while and starved there for about a year and a half. Finally, couldn't take it much anymore, so I put all my artwork in a portfolio and I went around the streets of Hartford. I borrowed a suit and a pair of shoes from a friend and got dressed up and took my art around Hartford. And I went into G. Fox and Company, and I got a job with from a mentor of mine that I'll never forget. His name was Ralph Daddio. I think he used to also be in charge down at 17 Magazine in the advertising department there. I'm not positive. I'm still doing some research on that. I'm trying to track him down. He would be about 90 today, so it's not easy to find a picture of him, so I don't have a picture. But what he asked me to do was he hired me. He was a New York type advertising executive, AAA if not quadruple A personality, really a hustler, and he ran the advertising department at G. Fox. He asked me if I would do a season greeting card for Mrs. Arbach, who was the owner at the time, her husband was dead by then, of G. Fox and Company down in Hartford. So I took the commission and I did that season's greeting for him, and then he offered me a job at $50 a week. I lived in the local YMCA in Hartford for $10 a week, so I had $40 a week to spend, and I did this cover for their 100th anniversary or something very close to it. I can't figure the dates there, but and the cover was done by me, and then I left for Kansas University, and I called the university and I said, "Please get me the cheapest room you can. I'm on my way," and they put me under the football stadium for almost nothing, and then I sold drinks during the football games to earn some of my tuition. So that was what happened. But Ralph Daddio taught me that anything can be done. You just got to put your mind to it, and you can try. When he first asked me to do this magazine at that age, I was amazed that he would give me that authority and that responsibility. And then what they did is not only did they put this on all their magazines for Christmas that year, it was I think 1958, it's down here on the thing, but they put it on all their shopping bags, it was on all the wrapping paper, it was on all the things that were hanging in the store, and at that time G. Fox was one of the biggest stores in the area, so I was quite pleased. I didn't see it all because I had all by then taken off for the University of Kansas. The other thing I'd like to do today in the introduction is thank some other of my mentors. You can switch back to me, thank you. You'll see them in back of me, I hope, by now. And that are a couple of rabbits. And these rabbits were very, very instrumental in my sort of early years of 0 to 6 years old when my dad used to read to me. My dad read to us in our house, not my mother, because there were 2 boys at the time. My sister didn't come along for 12 more years or so. So my dad would come home from the factory and he would read to us. And one of the things he always read was Howard R. Garris's book about the Uncle Wiggily long ears. Uncle Wiggily was a very beneficial rabbit. He was always trying to seek his fortune, and he was very good to others. On back of me you'll see 2 of the book covers that I got recently from a lovely young lady at the library here in Winsted, and Beardsley and Memorial Library in the children's room, and she made a nice copy for me, colorful copy from the internet. And Brer Rabbit, one of the pictures here you see is him plowing snow for all his neighbors, trying to be benevolent. And the other picture is he had made up an apple dumpling pie or something, and he was giving it out to a poor family of squirrels. So that was always stayed in my impression. It was very impressionable for me as I was younger and grew up. I never forgot Uncle Wiggily and the things he did, and the fact that he was always out trying to seek his fortune. I think it might have given me some of my drive. The next thing was Brer Rabbit. You know, Brer Rabbit was Joel Chandler Harris' stories, and we were all familiar with those when I was growing up. No more today, but Joel Chandler Harris wrote the Brer Rabbit into his stories, and Brer Rabbit, from him I learned, watch out for briar patches. Try to don't get stuck in a briar patch, don't get thrown in a briar patch, and try to always be on your toes and be aware. And part of the reason I bring these up each week, these kind of introductions, is because I'm a firm believer that if you're observant, you can learn from everybody, and that children today should be taught to learn from everybody, learn from every experience, whether good or bad, and then in the long run, they all add up to a successful person. So it isn't just school you learn from and teachers. They're very important, but it's every experience you have, and from your dad and mom reading to you to experiences that in your teens as you take up part-time jobs and things like that. So my view was learn from people. I learned a lot from people by observing. These people that I talk about, like Ralph Daddio, they didn't even know that I was learning from them, that they were teaching me. It wasn't until years later that I realized the things that I had learned. So having said that, later we're going to put up my other friends, the entrepreneurs of Winsted. First I want to talk about a few things, and then we'll put them up in the background for the rest of the show. We're going to have them on a few weeks ago, and for one reason or another we didn't get them up there, but they'll be there today trying to give me a hand, because it's going to be a tough show today with some real hard news, so good news, but tough stuff. So now I'm going to put up the first slide, which is we have to pay attention. We have to pay attention. As you know, we're in intensive care, and when you're in intensive care, everybody needs to pay attention. I want to start out by saying that, we still have the town problem that I've been talking about for weeks and months, and that problem isn't going to go away. That problem is we're breaking even, and we have been for 10 years, and meanwhile our infrastructure is not being kept up to date the way it should be, and we're not adding some of the things to the town, the quality of the town that we would like to add, and that need to be done. So that, I want to remind you, we still have that problem, and I will keep reminding you that, because the problem, you won't be able to solve the problem unless you really understand that we have it. How long will it last? Well, I did some papers to show that it probably lasts a long time, and certainly for the next 3 to 4 years, and then after that, if we're lucky, we may be able to get some revenue in here. If we don't play our cards right, we won't get the revenue then, and the thing could last for another 10 years. So we could be in pretty serious financial straits here. Always, of course, hopefully be able to do get our 3-4% in from the taxpayers to keep afloat, but that isn't going to help us too much with our growth aspirations. How should we proceed? Well, the way we have to proceed is we have to have a friendly environment and a welcoming environment to new businesses and new developments that want to come in and add to our taxpayer base, not just the tax base, but the taxpayer base. And we need to be very, very, we need to be seen by everybody that wants to come here as very hospitable and very welcoming, and very much in the realization that we know we need them as much as they need us. And it can't be, well, we're doing you a favor by letting you come to our town. It's got to be, let's all work together and let's all be successful together. Upwards pressure, we still have upwards pressure on our next year's budget, 208-209 budget. I'm not going to put the slide up this week. I've had it up every week since before, and I'll probably put it up again next week. But basically, we're somewhere in the 5 and a 5.5% upwards pressure when you take previous debt and you take the amount we're going to need for the town for raises and things like that, the normal inflation. So, we're kind of looking at least the normal inflation for next year's budget increase across the board. That doesn't mean we'll have that. Maybe we'll find some way to save some money. But I can tell you, there is no magic wand, and there's no big lump of money coming into town. The money will come from the taxpayers, most likely. I could be wrong, and we'll find out over the next 3 months. And the other thing I want to remind everybody of is, and I don't think you need too much reminding of this, but the big revaluation, upward pressure that came along, and you all know what that is now. And again, I mentioned some of the properties that up in the lake and other areas of the town went up hundreds of percent. One person told me his went up 1,000%. Several 300, 400, 500, 600%. So one way or another, there are people in this town. The average person will not get affected too much by the reval, but there are a lot of people who will be affected, and that will those people will vote. So they might be a small percentage of the people, but there'll be a high percentage of the voters, I think. So we need to be aware of that, and we need to pay attention to it. Progress towards additional new profitable taxpayers. As you know, in one of my programs a month or so ago, I told you that, it isn't just growing the revenue that's important, it's growing it profitably. We need to add taxpayers. When we do a reval, all that new revenue comes from the existing taxpayers. So that doesn't really help us out too much as far as our own taxes are concerned. What we need to do is get additional new profitable taxpayers in the town. And you can get developments in the town that are not profitable, that cost you more money in the long run than they save. So that's something we have to be aware of. We can't really legally, I don't think, suppress that, but we have to be very careful, and we have to encourage the ones that are going to be very profitable to try to counterbalance the ones that we have to do that maybe perhaps aren't so profitable. So right now, we're not doing too well in the short to medium term. All we have basically is a reval. We do have some people coming to town, and things are moving along, but nowhere near at the rate we need them to improve to be able to afford our needs and wants. We need to concentrate on the hospitality in the short term. That's why I keep hammering it on these programs all the time. And we need to get that good impression to come across throughout the state and throughout the New England and throughout the United States that we are a very hospitable, nice place to be, and we have to overcome some of our natural shortcomings like the terrain and things like that with our personality, so to speak. And personality goes a long way if you don't have some of the qualities that perhaps are needed. And then, of course, in the longer term, there is the possibility of the developments. They're not a certainty for any means, and by any means, and they may or may not ever come to help us. But we're going to try to get them here if we can, and we're hoping that when they do come, they will help us. As far as we're say here is that right now our average yearly increase in the net grand list has been about 16,026,447. A lot of that comes mostly from existing taxpayers, the reval being a big part of it. Now it's going to happen every 5 years. We're going to have a reval. Some years it might go down. It hasn't in a while, and it probably won't, but, we'll find out in 5 years whether it'll go up or down. I wouldn't count on it going down, although it is a possibility. We'd have to have pretty big economic problems for it to go down. The new intermediate profitable growth, anything between now and the next 4 or 5 years, is negligible, if any. Most of the money we will get from enhancements and people coming to town and building new houses and businesses will help us achieve the $16 million. It's going to take hard work to get anything else. So I want you to know at the start of this program that we are in tough straits here, and we're going to have to work hard to be able to improve and get the wants and needs. The teachers just got a reasonable increase over the next 2 or 3 years. I saw that. I thought everybody did a good job at negotiating and understanding our position there. That's behind us now, but that will be another upwards pressure on the next year's budget, which we will have to achieve one way or another. And then the long term is a possibility, as I said, if we, the town, can help, and if the developers are successful. I mean, we always have this concern that perhaps we'll be successful, and we'll get them their permits, and they'll get their permits, but in the long run, they won't be able to produce, okay? Now, I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I don't think it will happen, but you never know. So as a town, we have to be prepared. We have to be able to say, how can we grow our existing without the development, if necessary, if that doesn't come? So we have to you know, in the future weeks, I'm going to be putting more emphasis on that, especially once we get these permits agreed. Then we'll be concentrating on other things, the short to medium, intermediate term, rather than on the long term all the time. All right, with that, I'd like to switch now the background to my helpers, the entrepreneurs of the earlier days of Winsted, who knew how to grow a town and knew how to make it successful. And I want to first start out by saying that last week when I talked about the benefits of the new developments, this is going to be mostly new development stuff for a while here, the new developments, I'm going to provide you with some more financial information now. They relied a lot on the Harold Michalowski report, page 4. Basically, what they did in their report is they used a thing called the equalization factor, which took 50% of the appraised value of houses for their numbers. And in the town here, we used 70%, and that was one of the questions about that report. So I just want to tell you all, I did get some questions this week about it. We're using, the town of Winsted uses 70%, not 50%. So the numbers I gave you last week are pretty accurate. I did fix a couple of the little smaller mistakes I pointed out last week where I had retyped some numbers backwards or something, but basically they didn't make too much of a difference. So I want to just clarify that for you, that if anybody has any questions about that, you can contact me or somebody down at Town Hall, but that's basically what that's about. Now, I'm just going to do a quick review of last week for those who didn't watch and those who perhaps didn't get through it, but there's a new, the second of the Aurora projects is coming in now. Actually, I was corrected this week by the Town Hall. They said it's not called Winchester Estates anymore, which it was a few weeks ago. It's now called Aurora Estates. So I've changed it all to Aurora Estates now. And as you can see on this slide, the last one was put in. It was denied by planning and zoning because of density requirements in the area. And now the current one is been reduced in some respects. I'll show you that on the next slide. But I did a comparison here of what was on the one before it was denied and what's on the current one. And the basic difference is, the major difference is, we lost a lot of what we call restricted, age-restricted condos, or whatever the configuration was at the time. I can't remember. I think it was apartments, the last one. But that takes us a beating as far as profitability is concerned. It doesn't mean it's an unprofitable situation. It just means it's less profit for us because there will probably be more children in the school system. We don't know exactly yet how many there'll be, but we know there will be more because they've changed the ratio there. And the ratio now is, what happened was we lost 118 of the restricted housing, where it would have 2 people age 55 and all, or over, or maybe more than 2 people, but they had to be 55, or whatever they were, and or over. And we've gained some unrestricted. We went from 144 that we had before to 30 plus 33. So we're now up to 177 in the unrestricted area. Now, that I put up last week, the overall, I'm skipping a lot of the stuff I did last week just to do a summary here, but basically, of the total situation of both Highland Ridge Estates and us, which is already approved at our level, still needs Army Corps of Engineers and DEP at the state level and federal level, but if we take that as a given, and there might not be, we might come back and ask us to change the configuration, but if it's taken as a given now, and it's all we can do, and then we add this new Aurora Estates to it as submitted, that includes the changes they made, then we get like $6 million in revenue. I'm just rounding it off here so I can go quickly. And then our cost per capita, which comes from the Herald report, and all the bottom line is, if there are 2 children in each of these 177 condos, then the profit to the town will be about $2,396,280 just from the condos. There's other revenue, which I'll talk about tonight. The profit, if there are less children in it, because remember last week I had mentioned that maybe during the process somehow we can convince the developer and the town to probably get more age-restricted back into this configuration for our estates and get it down to, say, 85 unrestricted, then we would have less children. Or if even in the existing configuration, matter of fact, this is the existing configuration, I got a little confused there. If there's only 1.5 children per family, then our profit will go up to 2,991,000. If there's only one per family on average, it could be 3, 5, 8, 5, 7, 20. And if only 0.9, which some educators are saying might be the future trend in housing in this area, then we'd be up to a profit of 3,704,664, which goes a long way each year to helping us. That's recurring revenue. So every year we'd be getting that money in to help us with our wants and needs of the town. Now, the last time I also showed what would happen if we could pull off some way of getting more age restricted into this configuration. And if we did, then our numbers would go up. We would have profit would go up much higher. The one for 2 children would go up to 3,632,000. The one for 1.5 children would go up to 3,918,000, almost 4 million there. For one pupil, it would be 4,203,960, and if it was only 0.9 pupils per home with 177 unrestricted condos, then it would be 4,261,080. Now, there is a little bit of controversy here because I think, and I'm not an expert on this, but I've been told, and when I'm in the meetings I hear, that planning and zoning and the inland wetlands people aren't really supposed to worry too much about the economics of the situation. They're just supposed to make sure that the rules are followed that are in the plan of conservation and development and in the inland wetlands regulations and all. But sometimes the lawyers for the developers get up and say, oh no, you've got to take into consideration more of the needs of the town as far as the finances are concerned, and that may be true or false, but the jury's still out on that one. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know exactly what the bottom line is there, but I imagine there'd have to be a big legal battle to get to the bottom of that. Okay, now I want to add the new stuff for this week and bring you up to date on the numbers here. And that's why I asked you to pay attention at the beginning of the program, because we really need these developments bad, and you're going to see why here. You already saw how much it would help us just with the condo recurring revenue. Now we're going to talk a bit about the revenue that comes from the sewer usage is additional recurring revenue. The water usage from all these places, this is recurring every year. Plus, these are non-inflation numbers too. They'll go up with inflation just like everything else does. In one of these programs, I'm going to talk about inflation, but not here today. Water is $326,698. The golf course itself is $64,500 in recurring taxes every year, and then various amenities on the golf course. There's amenities. There's a whole list of them in the Herald Report if you want to read it in my green papers down at the City Hall or from the Planning and Zoning or in the wetland area. That'll be another $137,080 recurring every year. So, and then every vehicle, it says in the report, every house has about 2 vehicles, so we'll have plenty of vehicles there. They did do a traffic study, and they passed the traffic study. That was done by experts. So we think we're all right in that area. Otherwise, we wouldn't have got the approvals from the town for the first one. Now it's still, jury's out on the second one. But that's another $172,598. It comes up to another almost $1 million here, $907,052. So that's in addition to the money I was talking about earlier. So I've done another slide here for you which shows you the total recurring revenue with all these things put together. And now we're up to, and I'm not going to go through each one, but we're up to $7,041,112 each year. And I'm going to show you later what that means to you as a taxpayer, what percentage of taxes you will not be paying if these developments get approved and implemented. Remember, they're not even going to start for a few years, and they're going to take them, they say 5 years to do, and I'm saying probably 8. I don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball here, but I take the conservative approach at all times. It will be an evolutionary thing. They'll do some each year until they finally get to the maximum numbers. It won't all come at once. So 7,041,102. Burn that number into your head. It's very important. And may never happen. They may not be able to sell the house. There's 1,000 reasons. I could do a whole show on all the reasons why this thing couldn't get done, and I can do another show for an hour on all the reasons why it can get done. So you got to be careful who you listen to on this kind of stuff. And later on, I'm going to ask you to go find out for yourself. But now, as far as total recurring revenue, non-recurring revenue, this is revenue that only comes in once. It doesn't come in more than once for the developments. Now, one is housing permits. They need a housing permit. It's $15 per $1,000 of building cost. And when you work it all out, and it's in the Herald Report, the whole thing comes out to about $1,705,500. Now, what I did here, because we don't have all the numbers in the Herald Report for the new Aurora Estates, I just took 40% of the Highland Ridge number, because that's about what the Highland Ridge revenue, Aurora Estates revenue ratio is. So I took that 40 just so we could have a rough idea. Again, these are rough ideas, and nobody has a absolute positive answer at this stage of the game on any of this. So the housing permits are there. Each sewer, every time you hook an apartment or a condo up to a sewer, it's $1,000. And they're going to have 750 or so of these things. So, well, it's actually, going to be $758,000. And that's because there's 758 of these units combined between the two developments. And the water hookup's going to be another $1,000 per household. So you got another a big whack there. So in the beginning, $3,221,500 are going to come in as we go along into our budget. Now, the housing permit, that goes into the normal budget. That goes into the budget that we do every year, the town budget. The water and sewer hookup money goes into the water and sewer budget, which is in a separate profit center. And that money is used to help us keep our water and sewer fees down, to make repairs to the water and sewer. Now, there are some costs in starting all this up. You have to put a little more plant in there and a little this and that. But in general, we're going to have plenty of money coming in here to help with our sewers and our water. And then in addition to that, we're going to get the usage fees from these 758 places. So it'll be very, very helpful for the town. Now, there's one other thing that's going to happen there, which I'm going to talk a bit more if I can get to it today, is that developers are going to pay to lay the water and sewer lines all the way down to the Torrington Road from roughly around Main Street. It's a little farther down, more towards the Public Works area there. But they're going to lay the pipes all the way down and pay for that. So we as a town will benefit from the fact that we won't have to pay for it. And that happens to be our enterprise corridor. That's where an area where we want to get some of our intermediate money from. So if we can get that water and sewer pipe down there, we can begin, hopefully, to get more people and more businesses to use the corridor and build things down there and pay taxes. And that'll help us with our intermediate money that we need until we can get to this quantum leap, which I call the development money, in the longer term. Now, the next thing, I can't say too much about this. This is really good news. And if it all happens, it's really going to be good for us. So let's try to make it happen. Now, the next thing that's going to be wonderful for us is that we're going to get, guess what, some more jobs in the area. More jobs, not less jobs, more jobs. The golf course maintenance will be a recurring, another $1,380,000 coming into the town payroll money from the development. They're going to pay people to keep the greens up and to run this and to do that and to do the maintenance up there and things, and that's going to be about $1,380,000. The general construction costs are going to be about $75 million. That's 1,500 jobs times 50,000 salary per year on average, and it's going to be $15 million annually for 5 years. Now, I use 5 years here. That's because I use that in the report. It could be 8 years. It could be 4 years. It's not likely to be 4 years, but it's more like longer term. So that number could be stretched over more than 5 years. But still, $75 million in jobs for construction workers and all the kind of people you need to make this thing happen. Oh, painters, you name it, everybody. So that's good for our economy, and that's going to help us out. Now, the next thing where jobs will be is 600 jobs, for, another 30 million for Aurora Estates. That's the new one they're coming through, should it get approved. So if Aurora Estates gets approved, then we're going to have 106,380,000 in jobs in this area for people for over the next 5 to 8 years. And some of them, like the golf course maintenance, that's forever, okay, and that'll go up with inflation. So it'd be better if some of these jobs were forever, but they're not going to be forever. But they'll give a great boost to our economy, and hopefully once the developments are in and these jobs go away, the developments, goods and services side will provide more jobs for people by increasing the value of the people's businesses in the town. And that's what we call in this Michalowski report, this is what they call the induced consumer spending. Now, induced consumer spending is very important to us, and that'll make all the businesses in town happy. Gas stations, people who sell food, restaurants, clothiers, practically any business in town should benefit, drugstores, anybody here in town should benefit from this induced spending. And it breaks up into two different ways. One is the household spending. The household spending will be done, as they say in the report, in the Litchfield County area, mostly Winsted, Torrington. Won't all be done in Winsted because we can't meet all the needs here in Winsted for these people. So they will still go to Torrington for some of their needs, just like we do. I go down there too often, to be honest with you, for small items. It costs me more for the gas to go down than it does the item I buy. But and that's Barkhamsted and New Hartford and, you know, Canaan and these kind of places around here. So that'll be, I broke it into two numbers so you could see, 13,650,000 for Highland Ridge Estates and Country Club, and for Aurora Estates it will be about 5,460,000. So that adds up to 19,110,000, and that's every year. That's just not once. That's going to go on, and it'll go up with inflation. As we go up 3% a year for inflation, this number will go up 3%. Now, the next one is induced earnings across the state. Again, this comes from the report submitted by the developers in '06 into their Highland Ridge application into the public hearing. This is on public record, and anybody can go down and read it. And if you don't want to do that, get it out of my green papers in the town clerk's office and make a copy of it, take it home and read it, and you'll get a pretty good understanding of how the finances in the town are. So the induced earnings, again, I broke it down into two pieces, $88 million. This goes across the state. These are money that, because of this development, that's how much money will be spent across the state, because we won't just be using local people for everything. We'll be doing, you know, buying things from around the state, using subcontractors from around the state. There'll be a lot of that kind of thing. But that induced earnings for across the state is $8 million for Highland Ridge, and it's $35,200,000 for Aurora Estates, should that get approved and implemented over the years. So that's another $123,200,000, and I'm not quite sure how recurring that number is, but a certain amount of it will be recurring, of course, because we all go out, we all spend money in various areas. And I keep telling people, I like to use my own personal experiences as much as possible, because I've worked all over the world. I get people coming here from all over the world, and I can tell you what they do. They run to the stores. If they come from New York City, they don't go back without filling up their car in one of the local grocery stores. If they come from overseas, England, for example, they don't go back without a new pair of golf clubs, probably some computers. I was just up at my daughter's house in Maine, and her father-in-law came in from Germany, and he loads himself up with cell phones and computers and for friends and family, and there's a lot of that done here, and a lot of restaurant going to, and a lot of purchasing, and a lot of things. Go to the events in the area, up to the ski slopes. They go to the water parks and, you know, go fishing, they golfing, they do everything. So there's plenty of money going to come into the economy. Now, I must be honest with you, I don't think there's a lot of people who want this money to come into the economy, and they want to keep it small and peaceful, and that's their prerogative, and that's how they should vote, whatever they want to. Now, the other problem we have, and part of the reason I decided to speak here over the years, is because most of the businessmen have to be very careful what they say, because they do business with everybody in town here, and they don't want to anger anybody. So they keep their own private beliefs to themselves. But I would say that most of the people in this town want to see the town grow, prosper, and they want to see it get the wants and needs, have the better schools, have the better everything, and be part of what's happening here in the world. So that's kind of that. Now we're going to get to a very interesting slide, and that slide is where we talk about the percentage. As a matter of fact, there's 3 or 4 slides here for this. Percentage of annual tax savings eventually, if it all happens, if we make it happen, and the developer comes through, and we got to make sure that happens. We got to work with him to make sure he comes through too. Then eventually, for existing taxpayer, we'll have to pay less taxes. And I did some numbers here for that, which I'll go over these as soon as I get to my page. Okay, so if we take if the option happens as is presented, and there are two pupils per family, then in the future, each individual taxpayer will save 12% a year. This is a long way down the pike, but it's when the development's done. But we'll save 12% a year if there are 2 pupils in each of the 177 condos. We'll save 1.5. If there's 1.5 pupils in each condo, we'll save 15%. If there's 1 pupil per condo, we'll save 18%. That's 18% less that each of you will have to pay for taxes, because the new taxpayers will be paying that burden. They'll be paying their share, which means 2 can leave cheaper than 1. I'm not so sure that always comes out true, but that's what we were taught when we were growing up, that when we got married, 2 could live cheaper than 1. And that seems to be the case, I guess. Now, if it's 0.9, then it's 18%. If it's 1.0 pupils, it's 18%. Now, if any educators are out there looking here and they have any better information on the number of pupils per family, and I am talking to them, I'm sending them emails, I'm trying to get information back. But meanwhile, I did double check the Herald report. I looked on the internet with some people that are used to using the internet into the state databases, and it looks like in 2005, the Herald report was pretty accurate, and since the number of pupils is going down and not up, we should be in pretty good shape here with the numbers we're using as a guide. These are only guide numbers. Okay, if the residential is reduced to 85 unrestricted condos instead of the present 177 during the public hearing in the process or afterward or whenever, if it all happens at all. And remember, it might not be good for the developer to change to 85 unrestricted condos from 177. He may not be able to sell that. He may need to have the the unrestricted condos of 177. He may, so we have to live with that. And it's still, the point I'm trying to make here, it's still very profitable for us either way. It'll be more profitable with less unrestricted condos. But so if that changes and we go down to 85 unrestricted condos, then we're talking about 18% that you'll save every year on your taxes. And if we go to providing things go the way they're going now, I mean, if we have a great inflation year or something, then that's, it might be a little different. But percentage-wise, it'll still be the same. And then 1.5% is 19. It will be 1.5 pupils will be 9. I got a mistake on the slide there. 1.5 pupils will be 19%. 1 pupil will be 21%. And 0.9 pupils for each of these 85 unrestricted condos will be 21%. So you can see how this will help you and your family. That's money you can spend for your children's education or your retirement or better living for yourself, whatever. Okay? Now, besides that number that I just gave you, these numbers here, then we have to add to that because we had that other additional revenue that I put up on a previous slide. And if we can switch back, thank you. the additional recurring revenue will give us another 1% for each category, well, from the golf course, from the personal property, which is the vehicle taxes and things like that, and recurring fees will be another 3%. So that's the water and sewer stuff. So now we're up, that'll be 3% more. And then we got the one-time non-recurring revenue of 13%. That's where we talked about getting that $3.5 million in for hookup fees and things like that for water, sewer, and all. So on top of that number, so what I've done now is I put together another slide for you, which shows you how we total these things out. So you get an idea what the bottom line is. We like to talk in business about the bottom line. I went over that, I think, last week or the week before, about how businessmen like to know what's the bottom line and what is it we're headed for, where are we going. And basically the total is, so I've done a total, and I've said if we do have 177 unrestricted condos, as has been submitted by the developer for Aurora Estates, then when we add all these things together, we get 17%, and then for 1.5, 18%, for 1.0, 21%, and for 0.9, 21%. And then plus, you'll get the one-time 13% help as well. So we're talking about some pretty hefty numbers here. They seem small, but they're not really when you have to pay the money out of your pocket. And remember, we talked about after-tax earnings. We're talking about after-tax earnings here. So if you, depending which tax bracket you're in, if say 17% you have to pay, then you probably have to earn 25 to 30% or more to be able to pay that 17%. Same goes for the other numbers. So always think of how much you have to earn to pay this tax. That's very important. The next one is, if there are 85 unrestricted condos instead of 177, then the numbers go up. This one goes from 17 to 21, this goes from 18 to 22, 21 to 24, 21 to 24, plus the 13%. So you're talking about some nice numbers there. That money that you can use to pay for things in your own family. So let's just think about this a minute. If the developments come into town, they'll help us on our school situation, as you saw on the numbers. They'll help the whole town to be able to get into a better, help us fix up all these old buildings. They'll help us get the schools up to date and the town municipal buildings up to date and all kinds of things that we want to do, get better, more teachers into the school system. We already have excellent teachers, but I've heard in various meetings that we'd like to have a few more language teachers or a few more this or a few more that, and we'd like to add to our curriculums, and we'd like to be able to get better training aids and things like that. So there will be money for that if these developments come in. There is no other choice right now. That's why I may say at the beginning of the program, we're in tough straits here for getting wants and needs. We'll be all right probably if we pay 4% tax each year for the next 10 years. We'll probably be all right for inflation. Can't guarantee that. You know, way back in the 70s there, or 80s, early 80s, inflation jumped way up. That could happen again. So we have to be very careful to keep our eye on that. And now, don't forget, we also have the sword of Damocles hanging over our head, and that 1/3 of our budget comes from the state every year. And, you know, that could change. I mean, who knows what could happen with that. And if it goes down, then our taxes will go up. That means we'll have even a tighter squeeze, and we'll need a bigger shoehorn. So if you're in the shoehorn business, this will probably be the place to sell shoehorns if we have high inflation. Now, coupled with that, of course, if you can get these kind of savings yourself, then you can spend that money on other things, as I said, your children's education, upgrading your own lifestyle one way or the other, preparing better. You know, we in America aren't too good at savings and saving for our retirement, on our medical expenses, and as we get older, we're going to need that. And people are retiring later in life. I think it's my son and daughter, the older two, can't even collect Social Security until they're 68 or 9 now, somewhere in that neck of the woods. So we got to prepare for that. So this would be money that you could put aside for that, or you could spend whatever you might want to do. So the town has that choice, and you'll have that choice. We all win. It's a win-win situation. So I can't overemphasize that. Now, I'm going to just mention once more the enterprise corridor, because that we need for the intermediate growth. And if we can get the developer to pay for that, that'll go in within a year or two of his, within a year probably, of his getting all his permits and getting off the ground. He calls it in the ground. We call it business off the ground, but that's okay. If we can get him in, we get that installation, that water and sewer down almost to Torrington, then the town line, at the developer's expense, that'll save all the new developers from having to do the same. They'll be able to already have it there. They'll have to pay their hookup fees, they'll have to hook up to it, but they won't have to pay to dig it in the ground and put it down, which will, in many cases, be a deterrent from them wanting to come into that area there. Now, the enterprise corridor does have some tax abatements there and things, so, you know, we might not see as much right off the bat from them as perhaps we'd like to. They do give some kind of tax break for people moving into there. But anyway, it'll save on the future developers, and we should be able to shift people into there quicker. This will also allow for future development along the corridor that we so badly need. That will add up to the number of taxpayers that can help share the expenses of revitalizing the infrastructure of the town. Those people that go into the enterprise corridor are going to be additions to our tax base. And there are people down there expanding, that helps too. But getting new people in, new taxpayers that are profitable to the town and can provide jobs to the people in the town is one of our main goals. Okay, now I think I've talked quite a bit about that. I'm beating it to death here tonight. And I would like to have a little bit of time now to talk about these public hearings that are coming up in the next few, well, over the month of January. There are going to be two main public hearings, and there's going to be one important one more in the wetland meeting. It's important for these developments. Now, I want to say quickly that and I'm not going to read all this because I've only got about 8 minutes left, and I want to make sure somehow my own little clock here stopped today. But public hearings, the state statutes require that we have public hearings for many things, especially for adopting amendments and regulations, and for certain types of development applications. These developments fall into those categories. So we need a public hearing for Aurora Estates. That's going to happen on the 28th of January in the Hicks Room of the Town Hall, and everybody's welcome to come. Everybody's welcome to give opinions, and everybody's welcome to ask questions, and everybody, more importantly, is welcome to listen to the expert testimony. And as I said in previous meetings, usually people that are against these developments show up. Not too many people show up that are in favor, and I'm not even sure if you show up and you're in favor, it'll do much good, but it'll do you a lot of good because you'll learn what the truth is, and you won't be affected too much by either the rumors or the propaganda that may be flooding the town. We'll have these public hearings, and they're mandatory, and they're useful, and a lot of good information comes, and a lot of the people who come to talk do make good points, and they do get their ideas incorporated into the planning. The last Highland Ridge, I don't remember what the final number was, but at the beginning it was like 90 conditions that were placed on them. Some are the conditions that we always place on these things, but there were a lot there that were put in because various people in town did make good points, and they were accepted, neighbors and things like that. Now, for these public hearings, the developer does have to put out a registered letter to every neighbor, and you know, one time they had to call off the public hearing because they forgot to put out or misput out some of the letters. So there'll be a certified letter coming to everybody who's a neighbor of this Aurora Estates, and but anybody in town or the state, for that matter, can go to these meetings, and they're very useful. So the public hearing is for the Aurora Estates is on January 28th, 7 p.m., Hicks Room, Town Hall, and that's the same room that they hold the selectmen meetings in. And then the regular meeting for the inland wetlands is January 16th, 7 p.m. in the Hicks Room, Town Hall. Be prepared to stay a while. I don't know exactly where they are on the agenda, but if you go down to the Town Hall or look on the town website, Town of Winchester website, you can probably get a copy of the agenda. That'll tell you whereabouts these people are on that agenda, and they're usually pretty good about getting the developers up to the front. Not always, as I mentioned last week, but usually. So if you want to know approximately when they're going to be on, but nothing's guaranteed in either of these meetings as to time frames, how long things will go on, and but you know, they run very efficiently under the circumstances. Okay, now the next thing I just want to touch upon is the charter. The intent of the there's going to be a revision, not a revision. There's going to be a commission that's going to be looking at a possible revision of the town charter, and the intent of the Charter Revision Commission is to consider changing the town charter from a town manager form of government to an elected mayoral form of government, which is, there has pros and cons to each side of that, and this commission will be looking into that, and they'll make a recommendation to the selectmen. The selectmen will then either agree with that or not. If they do agree with it, they'll pass it on to town referendum, where all the voters in town can become familiar with the change requested and can vote for or against. If the referendum votes yes, then it will be a new charter revision. If not, they will vote no, and then it won't happen. And then sometime in the future, if it went towards a full-time elected mayor form of government, then it will be an election and to elect that mayor. And anybody, including you or I, could run for that, provided we're 18 and a citizen and all the rules that you have to follow. So that public hearing is going to be on January 9th, 7 p.m. in the Pearson School Band Room. Now, this is not the Hicks Room Town Hall. It's the Pearson School Band Room, plenty of parking down there. And it'll start at 7 p.m. And what I say here is, please come, listen, and politely state your opinions. And everybody will be listening, taking notes, and they'll be recorded, and there'll be a, I don't know, they won't be visually recorded, they'll probably be tape recorded, and there'll definitely be minutes of these meetings, and then you're welcome to come to that and express your opinion and encouraged to do so. Now, let me just say about these hearings. A lot of people don't come to these. Sometimes very important issues get discussed with very few people around. And there's so much knowledge that's available in these meetings that I encourage you, if you can, weather permitting. Now, I will say that when I read the books about Ralph Nader, his father and his mother took him to these meetings when he was very young. And he always thought that was very beneficial for him to learn about how the town was run and, you know, certain points like that. So if you want to bring your children and things, I think you're allowed to do that. If they're not 18, they probably can't ask a question, but maybe they can. Check and see at the town hall, town clerk's office, okay? So I won't go through the whole process here because I'm just running out of time, but I do want to thank my mentor, Ralph Daddio, for teaching me the New York way of getting things done, and I didn't follow all his example. He had a pretty high, I guess he had pretty high blood pressure from what I could see of him, but he was very successful. I learned a heck of a lot from him. And I thank the two authors for giving us those rabbits, because I learned a heck of a lot from them. And of course, thanks to my dad for reading me the stories every night and making such an impression on me over the years. With that, I thank you very much. I will be back next week. Monday is the Selectmen's meeting. Last week I made a mistake. I thought there was one this Monday, but there wasn't. But next Monday there will be one. So next week I'll be probably more or less commenting on that meeting rather than anything else. So let's have a good, successful, amiable meeting with good news for the world to help create this environment for success that we're trying to achieve. Thank you.